And welcome everyone to today's webinar, Real-Time Systems for Industrial Hygiene, the Driving Forces for Tomorrow. I'm Ed Rakowski, Editor-in-Chief of The Synergist, the magazine of the American Industrial Hygiene Association. I'd like to thank all listeners for attending today's event, and especially SGS Carlson for sponsoring this webinar. Our presenter today is Ron McMahon, the Director of Business and Solution Development at SGS Carlson. Ron works with staff and clients to develop innovative ways to make sampling simpler. These extend to developing new instrument concepts to automated processes that benefit clients. Trained as an industrial engineer, Ron has spent the last 30 years in management, marketing, business strategy, and innovation development roles for environmental, transportation, and safety products and services. This includes leading development teams for instrumentation design, applications, and training, which involves measuring health and safety-oriented air parameters and regulatory requirements. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Ron.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you very much to the AIHA and to all the attendees that are on the call with us. I hope you find this discussion interesting and enlightening, and I think you'll have some fun with it. We're going to do something a little different. There's a hands up feature on your right panel, and I think Gina's going to make that active. And so I'm going to, at the very beginning, just to set the tone of the meeting and the interface, I'm going to ask a few questions. So if you don't mind, after I ask the questions, just if your answer is yes, or you put your hand up on what the requested answer is, then put your hand up, and then before we go to the next question, you'll need to click the hand again just to take it down. And Ed's going to monitor those, so we almost like we're all in the same room together to just see just the number of people that maybe would respond to this and enlighten us on what they've experienced in the past. And the goal of this whole presentation is to get everyone tuned in to where we came from, don't take things for granted, reflect back on technology and how we got to where we are today, and what's coming that we all can help invent the future. And that's really the intent, and the goal is to get everyone involved in that process. People on this call are the people that are out taking samples and doing measurements and writing reports. And maybe if you just had a little vision into the future, you could start to provide some solutions that would be really meaningful to what's going on in the IH world, making things better, faster, simpler, and protecting people better. So with that being said, I'm going to start the presentation, and we're just going to start out with a quick few questions. So bear with me while I share my screen. All right. So I just want to set the stage for this discussion. Again, be sure and use your raise your hand button, and we'll reset it every time after we go to the next question. And the intent of this is just to get us all to stop for a minute and look back and really realize how technology has impacted our jobs, our work, and our lives. And we'll then, as time goes on, we'll project forward, kind of using the same idea of what if we could only look back. But this time maybe we're looking in the front window instead of the rearview mirror. So let's just talk about a few things and get on the same plane for this discussion. So the first question is that I want to ask the team and the group here is computing. Who in 1980, that's in our audience, would have ever thought that we would be where we are with personal computers? So just a show of hands, in 1980, did you see, sitting back then, and maybe some of you weren't even born yet, I know a lot of us were, but did you see it coming in 1980? Did you really think that we'd be walking around with phones that are the power, or smart devices, the power of our computers back in 1980? So Ed's able to look and see who's raising their hand.
And Ron, we don't have a ton of hands up for that one. I'd say maybe a dozen or so.
All right, that's good. So congratulations on those that could see that coming. So we basically today can do on our smartphone quicker, faster, and easier than what we could do on our PC in 1980, no doubt about it. And 81, 82, 83, I mean, it took a while for PCs to progress, but now we're doing these things on our handsets. So just to kind of extend this into our own work, who's handwritten their, like an industrial hygiene or a safety report in the last 3 years, as opposed to typing it on your computer or dictating it even? So maybe a show of hands, Ed. What do we got now?
Well, there's a few more rolling in here, but I'd say just pretty much the same number as we had for the first question, about a dozen.
All right. And that's out of what? We're now probably up to 300 or 400 people. So, and so what's the key thing to reflect on? With computers, it was the development of microprocessors. Obviously, there are a lot of big computers and things that went on prior to 1980, but when 1980 rolled around, a microprocessor really took hold, and it was the driving force between that really made things smaller, faster, more efficient, and could get it down into something that we could actually call a personal computer. And microprocessors today have advanced and gotten smaller, faster, lower power. But for now, we're going to say, hey, one of the main driving forces of this was the microprocessor, and obviously the volume of computers that drove the cost down, that allowed us all to be a part of that. Let's think about communications for a second. So, same question, who saw phones evolving to today in 1990? And with the end, raise your hand. Be sure and turn your button off after each question, but raise your hand. And who saw that coming? Who saw that we'd have what we have today starting in 1990? How we look, Ed?
We've got a few more on that one, Ron. I'd say maybe 3 dozen or so, and that's out of about 325 people who are on the line with us today.
Yeah, so looking at that, like just again, put your hand down. I'm just curious, how many people on the call today had bag phones? The early cellular bag phone. Ed?
I think some people might be clicking their hand to reset, but we've got a good number there. I'd say maybe 50 or so.
Yeah, good. So there's a lot of early adopters to technology. That's a sign that we all lugged around a 3 or 4 pound bag with batteries in it so that we could communicate. So again, I'm not counting people's. Let's put our hands down. I'm not counting people's internet landline phones, or what we would think are still handsets that we have in our house or our business, but actual old AT&T wired phone lines. How many people still have one of those?
That number's going up pretty quickly here. We're up around 80, I'd say.
Oh wow! Well, good. That's more than I would have anticipated. That's good. All right. And so, what was the key? What changed? And all this is going to loop forward back into IH as we go forward here. But what was the key to this? And that was really the development of cellular technology, that ability to exchange on the fly between towers and enable phones to work between those cellular towers effectively. And it's that's really the transitional thing that was incredible. And that was the difference maker, really. So let's talk about the internet. How many people in 1993 saw what the impact of the internet would be on our world? Look, from 1993, how many people saw that coming?
And I think we're topping off around 50 people out of around 330 on the call.
Okay, good. And it's in 1993, the beginning, it really took off and started becoming popular. It really is pretty amazing. Just the power of that. So kind of combining all these things together. We're on our smartphones. We have more information at our fingertips than just right now. Anywhere you are, you can Google it, you can look at it, you can search it, you can find out so many things. It's amazing. So just to kind of keep that going, who in the last 3 years has, I'm going to take the stamp the letter out, because last time I did this talk, everybody must still mail in their bills. I'm removing our bill pay option, but who in the last 2 or 3 years has used a fax machine to transmit information?
We've got a few more now. Over 100, Ron.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a high number. That's amazing. That's amazing. All right. So this has got to be a low number, Ed. It's got to be. How many people in the last 2 years have gone to a library to actually do research?
I would not be raising my hand for that personally, but we've got around 60 people, it looks like.
All right, good. Well, that's good. We still have some good library goers. That's a good thing. All right, it's pretty amazing, though. I mean, it was just like printed maps. When's the last time we used a printed map? I mean, everything's on our phones. Everything's readily available through the internet and through our smart devices. So what was the key to that? The key to that was the whole software implementation, IP addresses, the ability to interoperate through different computers throughout the world, and the speed involved. As time has gone on, we now have fiber optics. I have fiber directly into my house. My download is 100 megabytes per second. I mean, it's just things that, again, you go back to the early computer days and dial-up modems. And so speed has helped us also with the internet, just from communication capabilities, and even high-speed cellular technology. So let's go into the objective of the seminar, and we've kind of set the stage to look at technology and be realistic and pragmatic on what technology really impacted our lives and our day-to-day lives as IHs and working in the field, and how we deliver reports and all those things. So we're going to talk about just the definition of real-time and IH sampling. What does it mean? We're going to go a little trip back in time to kind of 1980 and look at some of the progression that we've seen in real-time instruments over that time period from 80 up till now. And then we're going to talk about the next generation platform and what are the pieces that come together to build the future for us. And as individuals and as teams, we come up with great ideas. And hopefully the objective of this seminar is to enlighten you onto some of the things that are coming or even are really here that are going to make this completely different for a lot of us. And I think we all should be a part of it. And the good ideas are going to come from the people that do it. People that are in the field that are doing this every day are the ones where the ideas come from. And that's the intent, is to get everybody excited about what they're seeing, what's coming, and how we can contribute to ideas to improve what we do every day. So what's real time? Real time is just like looking at your phone right now and getting the time, the temperature outside, so many things. It's just at the moment you want the data, it's available to you. That's real time. And what's that opposed to? And again, we're doing this from a perspective of IH. Is pulling a sample, sending it to a lab, and waiting for reports. Obviously, Galston's 5 days, so that's not too bad. A lot better than maybe some other labs in the world, but it's still not real time, and it's not in your hands at the moment you probably really want that data. What's the advantages? Why is real time so important? What's the big deal about real time? Why do we all, at least I think a lot of us want it, and there's things that impact that, including regulatory requirements, but the advantages is just a much simpler process with fewer potential errors. You can instantly troubleshoot what's going on as opposed to waiting 5 days or whatever and trying to get back and figure out what happened and what was the cause of whatever the hazard may be. And your ability to instantly make corrective action, like take corrective action right then. So there's a lot of advantages to it. And I think if we all looked at it, we would rather have real time than anything if it was reliable and it was something we could stand behind and it could meet all of our requirements. In IH, it's just something we got to be realistic about. Is a lot of times we have to meet regulatory compliance. We have to be able to do things to establish methods. We've got to meet detection limits. Things have to be accurate, and very often the biggest problem we have is specificity. If it isn't specific to a compound and there's interferences or different things or temperature or humidity can impact it, we can't rely on it. And so it's sometimes difficult to use that. There is a big opportunity now with screening devices, on the other hand, that allow us to screen samples, and it may not be as reliable or specific, but can give us an idea of when we should take maybe a sample that we need for compliance. So I think we have to look at it, devices that meet and are compliant, and devices that can act as a screening device for us. Obviously, from a performance standpoint, user interface, it's got, whatever we're using, you got to be able to read it effectively in the environment you're in. The display has to make sense. You got to be able to get that data stored, some sort of data logging typically, so that you don't have to write down every single piece of data, and just how easy is it to use. And then the last thing is just cost effectiveness, which is a huge part of what we do. Again, there's a lot of things we could probably do real time, but it's just a matter of the cost effectiveness to do that when you only need it 5 times a year or 3 times a year, or even once, depending on the application. So again, regulatory compliance, these are the elements that are critical to that. We've got to conform. Whatever the regulatory body is that we're dealing with, we have to be able to defend data, and we have to do it in a way that's acceptable per those standards. And again, screening methods, maybe not so much, but there are things that are becoming more and more available for us to screen applications or screen situations prior to taking that last sample, or making sure something has been adjusted and working accordingly, as opposed to waiting for data. And then eventually being able to take another sample or take something that meets the conformance standard and applying that so that you close the loop on that. Performance is really dealing with, what does the display look like? We've all probably used handheld meters, bigger systems, web-based systems now. Data gets transmitted via the internet to the web. We look at that. How easy is all that to use? How much training is required? It's something that if we don't use it all the time, sometimes it's hard to get back used to it, or retrain every time you have to use it if it's not something you use on a frequent basis. But if these things don't work right for us, even if the sensors work right, if they're not effective, you can't read a display in bright light, whatever it is, it's just not going to fit what we need in a lot of our applications. And then the last thing is really cost effectiveness. This is kind of an interesting example, and as a consultant in my life, I've used all 3 of these things. So, the first thing is truly a high-end, NOx monitor that's very accurate to ppb levels, but it's $1,500 a week to rent it. I can get a small electrochemical NO2 sensor and a portable gas detector, much less money, but do they read low enough? Are there interferences? It gives me real time, but it may have so many issues that it may be the data I can't rely on for what I'm trying to do. Maybe as a screening tool, but again, maybe not. And then the final piece is a lab sample. So, I may take a sample, it's $50, it gives me exactly what I need, it meets the method. But it all comes down to, is it cost effective to do for what my job assignment is? And as the $1,500 device starts to move toward, $50, then these things are going to start to be meaningful and be something that we as I think in the IH world are going to want to be able to go real time. It's just, can it ever become affordable? So let's take a little trip back in time now, and let's just take a look back in some things that, the way we used to do things maybe around 1980 or in that time frame, and how we do them today, and what was the technology that drove these items. Let's just look at it, taking a particle sample, little particles in an area. So, we would have to get the filter from the lab, we'd get the media, we'd have to make sure our pumps are calibrated, everything we had to run the sample the way it was designed, we had to monitor, we had to be there continuously, you had to complete the sampling and then fill out a chain of custody, send it to the lab. The lab took at least 48 hours for the filters to equilibrate, and they have their balance, and it has to be right, and the lab has to be accredited, and all these things, and then, you probably get your results maybe by fax. I don't even know if FedEx was around back in 1980, but the point was that it wasn't real time, and it was not a simple process to get some basic results. Whereas today, we take a side pack, we take other instruments, we make, the unit's been calibrated effectively by the manufacturer. We turn it on. We make sure it's charged. We turn it on. We take the readings. We data log it. We download it, and we've got all our data, and we're real time, and we're done. And it just eliminates a huge amount of work, and I have it real time. Same thing with confined space. When you look at confined space, even back in 1980, it was a squeeze bulb meter, MSA, the sniffer, and then we had some oxygen sensors, but those O2 sensors back then they were so sensitive to humidity and temperature changes, and how did we do CO and H2S? I mean, we go back then, we try to smell the H2S. At one point we had canaries, right? But it was a complicated thing to do confined space and be reliable. Nowadays, we take it for granted. There's probably 10 different meters on the market that do confined space. They have all kinds of different operator interfaces, different things they can do. But you turn it on, you make sure it's calibrated, you take readings, and again, you can data log the entire event. But it's just become a lot simpler and a lot more effective. And so, what's the core technology that's done all this? How did all these things happen? And the interesting thing about confined space was a regulation put in place because now we had the technology to do it effectively, or was a regulation in place and we had to get the technology to do it effectively? And it's kind of interesting when you look at it, it's the chicken and the egg. And we all know, even with the silica standard, for example, if something can't be done effectively, then it's probably not going to be passed as a standard. So you really got to have the technology or the ability to do what's required for the application. So let's take a look at these developments that happened starting back in 1980, and let's get very pragmatic about the technology that developed that allow us to get to where we are today. So, back there it was a squeeze ball. We had a little oxygen meter. Everything was analog. You had a lot of people, what's analog mean? Well, it was a little needle that would go on the screen. You'd see it go up and down depending on the readings, and it really was, the resolution of the screen or the little marks on the gauge, weren't that accurate, but it gave you some indication. As time went on, the microprocessor shows up in our world, and all of a sudden microprocessors started getting smaller, lower power, and they started popping up in these confined space detectors, which was a target to get regulatory compliance to make it, so people could check their spaces prior to entry every time. But how do you do that in a pragmatic way? So people started building these meters and trying to put them together. And even as that went forward, microprocessors came in and helped to be able to do some compensation for different things. But the real breakthrough was when City Technology released an oxygen sensor that was reliable. They really did. It was, before then it was Teledyne and some other sensors, and City Tech came out with this O2 sensor that nailed it, and it didn't have a lot of influences from environmental conditions. And they took it to Industrial Scientific at the time, and the rest is history. And Industrial Scientific in the 80s, really, 80s and early 90s, dominated that market for confined space because of the reliability of their unit, and a lot of it was the stability of that oxygen sensor that was developed by City Tech. And City Tech eventually sold sensors to everyone, but at the beginning, that was their sole client that got really everything going. And so as we kept moving forward, all of a sudden Ray Systems in the 90s comes up with a mini PID. HNU had this huge device, and Ray Systems got after it, did some development, and built a miniature PID that worked. And all of a sudden you could put a PID in your gas detector. You could have a very small portable PID instead of a large device, and the power was less. And so that, it was two back-to-back kind of developments from the sensor side really, progressed our industry. And as we move forward, again, you could commute data out. They were able to, we could, not necessarily in handheld devices, but other devices, you could hook them to networks and started hooking them to Wi-Fi and cellular networks. And SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition, has been around forever. But back in the days, it was a 450 radio, and you transmitted it a long way, and you had to have special devices, and things are starting to get simpler, because of cellular networks and communication, and then the cloud, being able to get things to the internet, so that people could get access to it, as opposed to having to be directly connected to it. And there's things that we still use for direct connection that, in emergency response situations that you can't afford to send it to the cloud. And so again, Ray, MSA, they all have a lot of systems using 900 megahertz radios that now are affordable and low cost. So we see this technology helping us drive our industrial hygiene world as we've gone through the years. So now the attempt is, what's coming? What is it now? That, I don't think I ever would have thought technology could move faster than it ever has, but we're now at a level of technology being introduced that combines all of those things, affordability, simplicity. It's absolutely mind-boggling how fast this is going, and how people that are building these things, and now even you could probably build them, how simple it's become to assemble a device that can help you in what we do in the IH world. It's just become that basic and that simple, and there's some core technology and some core business things that are occurring that are going to make this the greatest impact to our health and safety world that we've ever seen. So let's project forward now a little bit, and then let's talk about some of these pieces. So IH world, again, single, multiple gas sensors. There's now a manufacturer that has a 4-gas meter, connects through cellular modem, can connect through satellite, tell you exactly where the user is, upload the data every minute, puts it onto a nice Esri map, and it's all out there, and it's happening. And is it super affordable? Maybe not too much, because they probably got started a little early, but it's out there, and they're kind of leading the way. But as we go forward, the ability to get to the cloud, the ability of advancements of communication, modularity, increase in sensor volume, and things like that are going to start really increasing our ability to change how quickly we get information and what all we can get information on. The ability to position where people are, with a basic little ultra-wideband network, the plus or minus 3 centimeters XYZ over a 100-acre facility. And true augmented reality, that ability, because we can get to the cloud quickly and get data back out of the cloud quickly, this, through the internet, through cellular capability, what's that going to do to how we even interface things? And if you look at augmented reality at all, it's really interesting how that can impact where, we can make things much safer for people. We can make updates real time, and it becomes visual, and people are able to avoid hazards and body sensors. I know you guys have heard about biosensors and all the things happening, and all this is happening as fast as you can imagine, and there's a lot of volume behind that entire thing. And let's just take a quick look at some of the things that are driving it. So again, this is a part in it, and I think it's, we've been transmitting data around. We've been able to send data to the cloud and get it down. But today, we're in a position where we can go buy a $100 interface that will get a sensor's output into the gateway, up to the cloud, and then once it's in the cloud, we can do whatever we like with it. And one of the things that has always been the intent of the cloud is the ability to do any kind of analytics or statistical or calculations in the cloud on a server that has enormous power that perhaps you can't do in the existing gas detectors. So all of these things, driving everything to the cloud is interesting because it gives you the ability to do all sorts of algorithms that maybe you couldn't do before. It has the ability to gather sensors from around the globe at any given second, to compare data, to analyze data, to group data, and then it gives us the ability to, whatever result is, to push it down to smart devices that, it could be a computer, it could be your cell phone, whatever, and it's all here, it's all right now, and this cloud, if you just pay attention to Amazon and some of the huge cloud leaders, Google, they can't build server centers or clouds fast enough to keep up with this. And I don't know if everyone remembers, we started running out of IP addresses, which is how you assign an address to devices that come into the cloud. And several years back, they adjusted that, and so now we basically, I don't want to say have infinity, but we have room now for zillions, if you will, of devices to connect to the cloud with its own unique address. And it's just a great thing, and it's where it's all going to go. It's going to be cloud connected, and that whole thing is called the Internet of Things, IoT. And at Galston here, we're calling it IHIOT, the Industrial Hygiene Internet of Things. And we think it's going to be very interesting. So that cloud is up there, and it's given us all this capabilities. Now let's look at the sensors. And this is an area that, if you can see the screen, I blew up the sensor itself. This is a VOC sensor. It works more toward like a metal oxide type of technology. So it's not photoionization or that type of technology yet. But the real size of the sensor is what you see on your screen at the bottom left where the arrow points. And that's the dimension of the sensor. And it's, again, it's millimeters. So this is a device that is low power, has a very good lower detection limit. And if you've messed with gas detection at all, there's been some tricks in the past that would allow you to use multiple of these type sensors in an area, maybe multiple sensors just outside of the area of where you want to monitor, and therefore being able to take those signals, maybe even take them to the cloud, negate the effects other than gas or vapor itself, and get a meaningful result for very, very low power, very low cost, and effective enough to be able to give a measurement that could give us some indication of an issue, or as a screening device, and eventually perhaps if it comes far enough along, even something that could meet regulatory compliance. But these are the type of things, and the people that are getting involved in these type of sensors are people today that make hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sensors, and that's all they do for a living. And so CO2, different electrochemical technology, on and on. They're these high volume sensor manufacturers, because of the public wanting to know more about their air, and you're seeing a lot of real-time devices that are going in homes for indoor air quality. It's driving this market, and these things are getting smaller, cheaper, and much more effective, and giving us the ability to maybe use more than one or multiple sensors to help provide an answer, not just a single sensor we rely on. The other part that is very, very important, and I can give you an example so you could go out tomorrow and start building your own device if you want, is the modularity. So what people have learned is that they can make it simple enough and modular enough, then you can just buy the modules, put it together. You might need to do a little bit of programming, but in a very, very short period of time, you can put together your own device. There's a device from Sierra Wireless. It's called Red Mango, and you can go online at DigiKey and buy it for, I think, it's $50, $100. And all you need to do is make an interface, small interface board, and on Red Mango, they already have all the interface, because they're trying to sell you these cellular modems. They already have the interface that does all of the language, if you will, the API, that connects to a cloud that they will give you access to, that you can use so you can get to your data, and you can build your own dashboards. And so it's really, it's just incredible. I mean, it's an incredible thing that these modules are getting simpler and simpler and simpler, so that anybody, almost anybody, can buy the modules, buy the sensor module, buy the cellular module, put them together, and literally create your own device as you need it. Again, if you have to go to, if you go into an intrinsically unsafe environment, a Class 1 Div 2, Class 1 Div 1, obviously that's a different set of parameters, and and some of us need that, some of us don't. But it's just amazing, the modularity is empowering us to do these things ourselves. But the real thing, and this is the thing that is incredible to me, and this is the game changer. This to me is, we talked about the microprocessor, we talked about cellular technology, we talked about www, the software involved with that. But this is available now. Communication companies, Verizon, all the companies have now started to release the IoT. And when they mean by IoT, they're cellular capabilities, low power, that allow you to connect to the cloud with data. And what's mind-boggling about this, and here's an example, is here's Verizon's, what they call the LTE Cat M1 Network for IoT. And this is a, if you look at it, if you can see on the screen, it's $2 per month. So that means that, you know, for example, just take Gulfstream, for example, we have a refrigerated little cooling device. The media has to stay chilled. We literally could put together this little cellular modem with a temperature transmitter, and not only could I data log it to the cloud, but I could monitor that package's temperature during its entire trip and make sure that it never exceeded at any given moment, you know, its temperature requirements, so that when it got to the lab, it was in the right condition. That's just an example. So to the crowd, as you think about these things, these are the things that are the applications that we would have never, ever probably thought of, but now it's become affordable to be able to take a sensor of whatever you want to use and put it up on some device that will get it to the cloud and then interface that device and do things real time that we've never thought about before. And this is a game changer. This is it, and this is available now. You go to DigiKey again. Just as an example, go look at Red Mango, and it's all there. They even did all the software for you. You just got to get the interface to the sensor done, and you can just plug interface sensors in, and you're up and running and building your own system, and you can use their web tool. It's absolutely becoming seamless because people are trying to make it easier, faster, better for anybody to be able to get it up on the network. And this is where it's headed. This is it. This is the future, and it's just now. And so it all goes back to the point of our conversation is, you know, if we all are aware of that as a group of people in an industry, how can we impact, what are the ideas you would have that could impact our industry and make it this industrial hygiene Internet of Things that makes our life better, makes our clients' life better, makes our workers' lives better. You know, these things can hang on people, they can hang on places, they can, it's just your imagination can run wild, and if you know what's coming, you know, let's all be a part of it. Let's work together to build better things. And what's the volume? The Internet of Things revenue from the worldwide discrete manufacturing vertical market in this coming year will be $746.5 billion. I mean, it is incredible, and these things are happening, and it's going to continue to be just a myriad of data going to the cloud. And even in NIOS, Dr. Howard, I got to speak after him in the California Industrial Hygiene Conference. And his last 3 slides, it was like, what are we going to do with all this data? And he's exactly right. But you know, we're the ones that can help drive the right things, the right data, and then how do we work with that data to make people safer in the world and healthier? And it's here. The volume is now, and it's just interesting. And me, for all these years being a techie, I've never seen it move at the pace it is now by empowering the individual that maybe isn't a technical expert to be able to get involved in this and have the ideas and help build things out and get them done quickly to test them and play with them. And that's how things happen. But the ideas come from people like you or like me in my consulting life. You know, man, how can I do this quicker, better, and faster? Or an end user, you know, in a plant or a construction zone, what can I do to make it better? And these things are all available to us. So just a real quick thing, just a quick review, you know, the real-time solution design elements. You know, if you look at these deals, you know, look at the sensors that are available. Look at the communication capabilities. What data needs to be delivered? What is the data delivery, and how often does it need to happen? What does a report look like? What's the information you need to be able to see or give to someone to make it effective? What's the user interface? Is it, you know, something on a web, or is it a local interface? You know, is it pulling it down from the cloud? What's your power requirements? Does the enclosure need to be something special? What do I need to put it in? What kind of box? And then, you know, what are the additional things I can add to this, right? And then you got to apply the business model. But what's interesting about the business model is, you know, if you had a project coming up for 2 years and you wanted to do a special thing that would help you make your life easier, it's almost like now if you look at renting that device, I'm telling you, you could almost build it for that. You could build it and make it better than trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And it's all available. It's not, there is no longer any rocket science required. It's an easy step. And again, the drive of this is to get everybody aware so that, you know, let's be thinking about these things, and let's not be the people that didn't see it coming. Let's be the people that make it, you know, new and different, and really speed the pace of how we do IH. And, you know, we also know that, you know, these things aren't real, and this is just an example. So this may be my only stick at it with Golson. It's a pitch a little bit, but it shows you where we're at. Golson realizes that we've got to move down this path. And so we've got a partner that we've developed our first IoT device. But we know IoT, you know, a VOC, a PID can't tell you what it was. And so we've worked with this company. We now have a system that allows you to look at real-time information, but through that same device, be able to grab a sample. I get a 2 ppm on my real-time device. I snap a solenoid on a SumCan, and I let the vacuum take over, and I get a sample. So now I didn't have to be there, and I'm able to get a definitive thing. What was it that was that VOC, and is it something that's dangerous, or is it something that can help me identify the problem? And the same thing with a pump. Activate a pump and pull a cassette, pull a tube, whatever, and be able to diagnose it at a lab level, but use the real-time device to determine when's the right time to take that sample, or the best time to take that sample, or the time you're going to take it and you know you can get it, right? You can get what the issue is. And there's all types of user interfaces. Again, these are just an example of the different user interfaces that are out there that make it really simple. We all love to look at trends. What's the data? Is it going up, going down? Easy to download. All these cloud-featured basics allow you to download data anytime you want. You know, you can be at home and you wake up and go, man, I thought to download that data and take a look, or you know, they can email you an issue, whatever. It just all becomes so simple and just user-friendly. And that's really all I've got. I do want to add one thing very quickly. I'm on the RealTime Committee with AIHA, and the RealTime Committee is working very, very hard to make sure that the gas detection and air monitoring is done responsibly. There's some new standards and things that are being written out of this group, and I'm being frank, I haven't been as active in this group as I would like to have been, but there are some really great members of our team on that group. And if you're on the call, if there's a link that we could send people to get data about some of the things that the committee's trying to do to improve real-time monitors and making sure that they're you know, they're portrayed accurately, that they meet requirements, that the users of these devices understand, you know, their actual, you know, good things, bad things, what they need to watch out for. So if any of my partners on that committee are online, if you could just text everyone or chat with everyone and give them the information on where they can get more information about the AIHA Real-Time Committee and some of the things that are coming out of that group to help make that better and get things documented properly. So, and that's all I've got. I appreciate everyone's time, and if there's some questions, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Ron. It looks like we have about 15 minutes for questions. Just a reminder to our audience, if you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the chat window on the right side of your screen and send to all panelists, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time left with. Clayton has a question. He writes, how is information security or cybersecurity configured in the future you described, Ron? For example, what is the security associated with the device you have been discussing?
All right, so I am not a software security expert, but there is levels of security that's being worked on nonstop, you know, cybersecurity to make sure people can't get into this data. And I know that's a big issue for a lot of companies where we're dealing with some very, very large entities that are very sensitive about that. And, you know, there's a lot of data that's been up there from some of these very large companies for a long period of time. And I think that, you know, there'll always be a threat of that, but the improvement in that area is as rapid as it is for the development of these technologies. And, you know, it's definitely something you have to study, and when you do look at it, do everything you can to make sure that it's encrypted and it's protected effectively.
Okay. Gordon has more of a comment than a question. He says that if you make a real-time exposure monitoring system that's intrinsically safe and can clip on a worker's collar, I'll be interested.
Yeah. So how many gas meters? There's already one on the market if you want to buy it. And it's the guys that made all the early yellow meters. What was that? VW Technology. So Cody Slater and John Pinball from CityTech, one of the founders of CityTech, actually have that device, and it's available today. I can't say that it's inexpensive, but it's available today. So there are people working on that, and they're the first ones to the market with it.
Okay. Renee asks, are you aware of any real-time instruments for lead in air?
You know, at this point, I am not. I am not aware of anything that would do that specifically. But there are people that are using, I guess, you know, things for doing lead in paint on walls and things like that. She's probably familiar with that. But I haven't heard of anything that could do it effectively in air. But if that, you know, that again, that's probably a good one to look at.
Another question, do you have any update on real-time benzene detection? So far, the only available tool seems to be ultra-ray or equivalent, which is near real-time, but not quite.
So, yeah, there is actually, but it's not, you know, this goes back to that affordability. You know, that affordability is everything, really, cost-effectiveness, and depends on the degree of the severity of if you don't have an accurate benzene you know, reading. And so there are some specific benzene and, you know, explosion-proof GCs now that can be put into areas, and you can get it non-explosion-proof as well, that are very, very, very accurate. And they use thermal absorption for the actual sampling method, and then it desorbs and goes through a typical GC with a PID. And those are incredibly reliable and accurate. And they were developed for specifically this one particular device I'm talking about, for offshore platforms in the North Sea, because they couldn't stand to have any more false alarms, false positives, and you for sure don't want a false negative, right? But they are out there, but they're expensive and they're not handheld. And some of the other devices, you know, those are I think they're interim steps, right? They try to scrub out different compounds and different things, and I don't, you know, if you've used them and you found some effectiveness, I think that's a good thing. But I don't know how accurate they are and how reliable they are at the end of the day for personal exposure.
Okay. Ron, I think a couple of people asked about the company you mentioned that was making small sensors. Was it Red Tango? Was that the name?
So that's the Sierra Wireless. So if you go on to Sierra Wireless, they are the ones that have Red Mango. So if you Google, you don't have to go to the library for this. If you go Sierra Wireless Red Mango, that device will pop up and you'll see what it's all about and how they provide you all the pieces, including the web portal. So it's a great way to test things and get things up on the cloud and start getting familiar with that technology. The small sensor devices, the one that I put up, I always have a hard time with its name. It's like Centurion, but it's out of Germany, and we're actually getting some of those to play with them. And just check how effective they are on the low end of different compounds. But if anybody wants any more information on that, then I can email that data out. I'm glad to send you the name of those sensor manufacturers and really interesting technology. And it's all high volume. You know, and they've got a CO2. I think they have a particle coming out. There's a lot of neat sensors that are coming out that are going to be pretty effective and very, very, very low cost.
Okay, Stuart asks, could you give some specific examples for the best use of real-time monitoring today and what's available out there?
So, you know, obviously any of the kind of 4-gas or single-gas PIDs, you know, except for carbon monoxide and maybe H2S, there's not a lot of real-time lower-cost sensors that we rely on, right, for the data. We typically do something for exposure that might be, you know, more lab-based. But if you've got the money, you know, when I had that example of that NOx device, you know, those things are highly accurate, highly specific, And with that cloud device that I showed you from Galson, our partner, we can actually connect those kind of devices to our cloud. And if it's something that either for rent that you could spend that kind of money, or buy, then those devices are out there. They're very, very effective. But it's just going to come down to the cost basis at this point in time for some of those that maybe are just on the line of whether or not they're really affordable or not.
Okay.
Ahmad.
Sorry, go ahead.
By the way, just keep an eye on some of the new affordable mass specs. There's some portable mass spectrometry units that are coming out that are gaining a lot of interest, and their volume is starting to go up a little bit. So, there's been some of these devices in the market, and they've been very, very expensive and sometimes a little luggy. But there are a few devices that are coming down the pike that different people are keeping their eyes on. What's cool about Galson is, we want to look at real time and we want to look at things that, could displace us. We want to be there and be able to provide that type of system. And so there's some devices coming that might be interesting to all of us from a mass spec level. And that would really, when you're talking about being able to do something effectively in the field at low level, and specifically it could be a big game changer. And there are some of those that are getting down in price and down in weight and size.
Okay, Ahmad asks, what stressors can be measured by real time? Can it measure dust or welding fumes?
So we do it, you can do that as particles. That's right, you can do it as particles, and then from that point, if you assume the worst case on a real-time meter and you know what the particles may be, you may get a premature exit or have to stop a process. But if that's not the case, you can also pull a sample. There's a product out there called NanoZen that has a built-in cassette, or you can use a slide pack with a tube and then put your just a typical particle cassette that you can send to the lab and have it analyzed. Whether it's a cyclone or a PPI sampler from SKT, you could do that combination of things. But a lot of people right now, especially with silica, it's interesting that real-time particle measurement, assuming worst case, there a lot of people are liking that concept of, hey, I know it's not all silica, but it gives me the ability to warn workers whenever dust levels, residual dust levels are at a high, and if I assume it's all silica, I'm going to fail safe, not fail unsafe, and so we're seeing more of those kind of applications.
Laura asks, is there any real-time Legionella testing? I doubt it, but I figured I'd ask.
I'm not a Legionella expert. We don't even do Legionella at Galson. I think we stubbed that out. But not that I'm aware of. There was a device in Europe that people were playing with, and it's not necessarily real time, but it was a sample that that was a destructible sample. You take it and you insert it into another device, and it gives you some concentration of different bio matter things, whatever it could be, mold or Legionella or whatever. And I just got to be honest, I haven't followed up on that, but it was something we took a look at one time about a year ago.
Emmanuel has a comment. He says, I'm worried that the great interest in the advanced capabilities of real-time monitors can diverge to focus on basic characteristics such as accuracy, precision, and choosing the right sensor. Do you have any comment about that, Ron?
Yeah. So again, we're talking about the volume of these sensors going up, and you may or may not be seeing things about smart sensors and community monitoring. If you're in California, that may make a big ring to you. But there are government agencies that are getting very concerned about deployment of these community devices that could potentially cause reaction in communities that isn't warranted. And so there's a lot of people worried about that. I can assure you that there's government agencies right now, especially in California, trying to figure out how they get around that and try and prevent that with some type of regulations. And anyway, it is a concern. You bet, that kind of thing, and it could cause communities to react to things, and it would not be a good thing. And so there's definitely, you got to have the right sensor, and you got to use it for the right application. And to the point, there's people that may not be doing that effectively, and that's maybe why we need to be doing more of it, right? as IHAs, let's make it better and be responsible, just like the IIHA Real-Time Committee. Let's make sure it meets some requirement or minimum standards so that we're not putting stuff out there that can be misunderstood and misleading.
Okay, Charlie writes, the biggest issue I face is IT security. I have a very difficult time getting anything approved that runs outside of our company's internet, cloud, or internet-based services. Do you have any experience with this or guidance on overcoming this challenge?
So, we experience it all the time with our new device because large corporations, some of the largest in the world, are concerned about that, and this type of data, they have an issue with it. I think, again, as time goes on, some of the largest oil companies in the world have put some of their environmental data in the cloud, and so there's people that are doing it, and there's precedents that are being set, and I think it is going to be one of the challenges for applications for people to do that, and there may be a way to get around it by it, being more of hidden data. Doesn't really have to have people's name on it. It doesn't have to be referenced to anyone. It could be, anonymous, if you will. But people will address that. It's got to be addressed because it's going to continue to be an issue. And again, I think software companies are razor focused on helping solve that problem, or they won't be able to be part of the solution. So I think it's going to improve, and that's an area we really need to pay more attention to because we do have a lot of clients that go, I'm not putting my data in the cloud no matter what. And then we've had some say, let's do it, but just don't put our name on it and then let us know what it is, or give us a window into it, and we'll interface it to our own devices. So, and that is one way is to have kind of your own firewall between the device that's collecting and the device that's actually putting it into your system.
Okay, and I think this is going to be the last question we have time for, Ron. Binion asks, are you aware of any real-time equipment for detection of biological agents?
So there are some out there, and again, I'd have to dig through my records again. That's something that hasn't been on our radar, those type of things. But yeah, there's some real-time devices out there that do some of those agents, and for what I know, some of them are pretty effective. A lot of emergency response teams that fear that. I know they've purchased some of these devices, and there are some out there that might be able to help. And I can dig through my items and send that to you if you like.
Okay, great. I apologize to anyone whose questions we weren't able to answer. I'm sure Ron would be happy to follow up with you via email. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. My thanks to Ron McMahon for his presentation, to SGS Golfin for sponsoring today's webinar, and to all of our listeners, best wishes for the holidays to all of you. This is the final Synergist webinar of 2017, but please be on the lookout for announcements of Synergist webinars in the new year.
Thank you, Ed, and thanks to AIHA and all the attendees.